Alright, on to episode 30. On to another great ape. Luckily, it is not going to be nearly as bad as the bonobo. But today we are talking about the Bornean Orangutan. So, first and foremost, before we get into it, let's discuss the exhibit we're making here. Because I want to do something a little bit different. And we are going to have somewhat of a, let's call it a two-tier exhibit. We're going to have this little valley that I'm making at the moment, and I'm going to have a pathway go above that, slightly above the raised areas, and then we're also going to add a bridge for the orangutans to actually walk over this bridge. I know it sounds a little complicated, but as we go further along, it'll start making more sense. But now, let's get into our animal in question. So, the Bornean orangutan, scientifically known as the Pongo pygmaeus, is the largest of island orangutan species, the other two being the Sumatran and the Tapanuli. This species is the most abundant as well, although still being critically endangered, only having roughly 104,700 left in the wild. And are, pretty well known, I do believe, with the signature red fur and the very flat face of the males. And of course, even though they are the largest of their kind, they are still relatively small when it comes to great ape standards. Technically speaking, they can range to being slightly smaller than the average human. When it comes to height, they absolutely are smaller. They can range anywhere from 3.3 to 4.6 feet tall, and can range anywhere from 66 to 220 pounds. Being said, it does somewhat make sense, since how their scientific name is actually the Bantu word, Pongo, meaning primate. It's actually, unlike with a lot of other names, is actually from an African language, Bantu, like I said. And that is their general term just for great apes, and doesn't necessarily mean great apes. It's a little complicated. But it does make sense that if it was based on an African language, that the second one would be pygmaeus, which, if you can't tell, means pygmy. Because comparatively speaking, if you were to compare something like a gorilla to an orangutan, it would absolutely be much smaller. And orangutan, the word itself, is actually a Malay term for forest person or man of the forest. Now, unsurprisingly, because it is the man of the forest, it is primarily found in extremely tropical areas with thick canopy coverage, and since how they are mostly arboreal, that you really aren't going to find them too much on the ground. However, the Bornean orangutan specifically actually is much more commonly traveling along the forest floor. Now, speaking about their lives in the trees, it is important to note that while, yes, they do have to come down to the ground every once in a while, they do spend as much time as they can up above the forest floor. And that includes where they sleep. A lot of people may not realize this at first, but orangutans, and actually a lot of great apes, will make nests, essentially using branches and leaves and whatnot to form, a nest just like any sort of bird would. Now, because of the intelligence of orangutans, there's actually a very interesting, a little bit of addition to it than just your average nest. You see, the orangutan is actually very intelligent, and one of the ways that it actually finds comfort, just like how one of us would, is they will make pillows, canopies, and even makeshift blankets out of foliage in an attempt to, be a bit more comfortable in their lives. Now, not only do they build nests, they actually make a new one every single night. Now, I could only imagine how annoying it would be to spend every single night building a new bed. I don't know why they don't use the ones that they already have, but that does seem to be a trend with the species. Now, if you take a look at what I'm doing, I am putting a bit of a chain link right along either side of our walkway, and that is because I feel like it does need a bit of coverage, at least, you know, in a realistic sense, so that the animals and the people are separated, because orangutans and great apes in general are extremely strong, much, much stronger than any human being could ever be. However, lucky for, well, everyone involved, they're extremely peaceful creatures. And other than the average boasting between males, you really won't see them aggressive in any way. Luckily, unlike our previous episode nominees, they just seem to be naturally calm and don't have special ways of maintaining that calm. However, it is important to note that it is a wild animal and could absolutely hurt a guest at your zoo, so putting up some fencing is probably a good idea. Now, I do recommend putting a top on, if you do want it to be realistic, putting some form of top on the chain link. But as you know, I am horrendous with building man-made structure, and I can't see the chain link, to be completely honest. I am literally incapable of seeing the chain link in this game. I don't know if it's just me or if it's how the game works, but I struggle heavily. Now, because of the animal's arboreal life, I decided to pretty much jump on the climbing parts of the exhibit right off the bat, and it does also help in figuring out how I want everything to look and how I want it to meld together. So I have this first walkway that's going to be right above, and hopefully it gives the ability for any sort of guest to really get a nice look at the animal. However, in reality, I could see why a zoo may not want to do this, but it's a video game. Let's have fun with it, you know? Now, if you were wondering why I decided to make the entire exhibit out of both stone for the primarity of the exhibit, and then on the bottom making pretty much a climb-proof area, well, that is because orangutans are extremely infamous for escaping their exhibits. And we'll get a little bit into that later, but consider that foreshadowing for the intellect that these animals have. Now, not only are they smart, they're clever. They have been known to make tools, to pick locks, to use like crowbars, and essentially have been really seen successfully recreating what we have learned to do in our species history. Now, the animal isn't just native to the island of Borneo. As a matter of fact, they used to, or the orangutan species as a whole, used to exist in South China, Southeast Asia, Java, and Sumatra. But unfortunately, due to deforestation and the palm oil industry absolutely destroying their native land, if you want to know a little bit more about the palm oil industry, go ahead and check out my Binturong video where we first discussed it. It is a very big issue in Southeast Asia, and I do highly recommend looking into it because it has displaced an unspeakable amount of animals. But on top of that, they also suffer from hunting. Again, like I said in the Bonobo episode, I don't understand why you would hunt a great ape. They just seem a little too human, in my personal opinion, but I mean, I'm also not a trophy hunter. I am, the experiences I've had hunting and fishing have all been for food and food alone. However, I'm not going to blame you if you do get a trophy and food. You know, you get a nice big buck. Now you have back straps and a nice decoration. That's fine. But I never understood hunting just to kill something. Before I get too far off on that tangent, however, if you do want me to sort of discuss my ideals between poaching and hunting, I would be more than happy to make a video about it. Just let me know in the comments below. Other than that, let's get back to our subject matter. Now, usually males are pretty isolated and solitary. That's no surprise. That seems to be kind of a trend. But the females have been known to occasionally move off on their own, but will stick around and pretty much live their lives with their respective parents. Now, on top of their parental structure, they seem to be the biggest mama's boys of the animal kingdom, other than us, of course. So, the young will usually stay with their mothers for roughly 8 to 9 years. However, there have been ones known to go past 10, and even some females that just stay with their mothers for their entire lives. They're extremely good parents and are known to adopt baby orangutans that have been either orphaned or abandoned, and have also been known to be great grandparents, something that you only occasionally see in the animal kingdom, seeing how they're kind of further removed at that point. However, orangutans do seem to have a very strong familial bond, something that I think we can really understand with one another. Now, I discussed their intelligence, and I went a little bit in there when it comes to making lockpicks and making crowbars and just finding ways to escape their exhibits. And I feel that there's no better way for me to explain this than speaking about my favorite orangutan to ever grace this mortal coil, and that is the legendary Ken Allen. With the nickname given to him by the media of the Harry Houdini. Get it? Yeah, Harry Houdini. Haha. I actually do think it's funny. But anyway. So, you may have heard of Fu Manchu. That was another orangutan that was famous for breaking out of his exhibit. He was the one that actually would make a lockpick and hide it in his mouth. Well, Ken Allen decided that was peanuts. That was nothing. Who cares about that? So let's talk about this animal, and let's go through his story. This is a very broken down version. I highly recommend you check out some of the other videos that are made on him, and really get a good idea of this absolute specimen of sapien kind. Born in the San Diego Zoo, February 13th, 1971. Unfortunately, he was rejected by his mother and had to be raised in a nursery, where he became very well acquainted with his human caretakers and really grew to kind of coincide with humans. Not afraid of them, doesn't feel that they're any sort of threat, which was both a good thing and a bad thing. One of the good reasons is he was very sociable and could really get along with the majority of his keepers. The bad way is he always wanted to hang out with people, and he also was extremely smart. One of the ways he was so smart was while he was in his nursery, he found out that when everyone's gone, well, he still wanted to play with his toys. They locked him up in a cage for the night so he didn't hurt himself, break anything, as you do with a child in their crib. Well, he decided, screw that, I want to have fun. I still want to play like a child. So he unscrewed the bolts of his cage and escaped. Didn't go far. He stayed in his room and he just played with his toys until the zookeepers came back, and they were very unhappy. He wasn't supposed to do that. I know, surprising. So he realized that he didn't want to get in trouble again, but he still really wanted to play with his toys. So he just did the same thing, except when he realized the sun was coming up, he just went back in his cage and re-screwed all the bolts. And they were none the wiser, except for the fact that everything was strewn about. So it didn't take long for them to realize that Ken Allen just escaped again. Despite being as intelligent as he was, we're a little bit more clever. But his big escapes didn't happen until later in his life. Fast forward to when Ken was old enough to actually leave the nursery, and he was placed in the main exhibit with all the other orangutans. However, there was an issue. The other male in the enclosure, named Otis. Ken did not like him at all. Because, well, they're two male orangutans with a bunch of female orangutans. Like, I hope I don't have to explain to you why they didn't get along. This is very, like, first year animal education, right? So, he absolutely hated him. So they decided, you know what? We're going to move Ken over to his own exhibit. And Ken hated it. He was not having it. He wanted to have all the fun that he used to, but it's hard to do that when you live by yourself. So, on June 13th, 1985, Ken Allen escapes his exhibit, and he just starts walking amongst the people. The zoo was open. He was just walking around with all the customers. And honestly, a lot of people did the smart thing, and they got away. They ran away. They wanted nothing to do with this. There is a wild orangutan walking around. That was a smart thing. However, some of the patrons realized that Ken wasn't doing anything. He was just chilling. He was vibing. He was actually walking around the zoo looking at the other animals just like the customers. The issue was, well, there's a couple issues. The big one being he didn't pay for a ticket, so he's going back in the cage. But, you know, you can't just let an orangutan walk around the zoo. At this moment, though, the zookeepers find him. He doesn't put up a fuss. They just walk back to his exhibit and move on. The zoo's PR team were shaking in their boots. They were freaking out. They were absolutely terrified that if the media got a hold of the fact that one of their animals escaped and were just walking around town, well, around the zoo, that they were going to get dragged through the mud. They might get sued. They don't know what was going to happen. Little did they know that the media loved it. They thought it was the funniest thing, made a whole bunch of articles about how cool it was that Ken Allen was just walking around with all the people. Though, you still can't just have animals escape no matter how much they're liked. So, throughout the years, the zoo had constantly tried to contain this absolute legend, and they couldn't. He truly could not be contained. He definitely could not be stopped either. They had tried so many times. They tried adding a moat. They tried to put some females in so that, you know, maybe he was just lonely. So, you know, put some females in there so that he's got someone to hang out with. Well, turns out he just taught them how to escape too. So now they had even more problems. And eventually, they managed to stop him after getting professional rock climbers to come in, find every finger and foothold they could, and just completely make it unclimbable. And on top of all that, even when he escaped from that, they just put an electric wire around the top of the fence in an attempt to stop him. So, how many times did our man Ken Allen escape from his exhibit? It's a total of 9 times. Even before they were able to truly, like, stop him with electric fence. They had people that just stayed, just keepers watched to make sure he didn't get out. And he still escaped because he knew the outfits of the zookeepers. This absolute legend was not only smart enough to escape, he was smart enough to outsmart his keepers. They had to go undercover like feds just to try to stop him. But the most important part about all of this, even though they did manage to stop him after a while, you know, he eventually settled down, had kids, and just, sounds like I'm talking about a person this whole time. Anyway, settled down, had kids. He didn't do anything bad when he was outside the exhibit. He was completely peaceful. No one ever got hurt. No one even had a panic except for the first time when they weren't expecting it. Except for Otis. A couple times he found his way over to the old exhibit and just started throwing rocks at Otis. Because fuck Otis. We're all Ken Allen stans in this house. Otis can eat it. However, there was one other very interesting part of this story that I didn't know how to add, just for the mere fact of how quickly I want to wrap this whole story up. But I have to tell you. After they found out of Ken's first escape, and how the media talked about this beast of a primate, he started getting a little fan group. Mostly by old guys that were retired and were just trying to find a way to have fun. But they had a weekly newsletter. They had merchandise. And what was this group called? The Orang Gang. And I am all for that. I want to be a part of the Orang Gang. That is the... It's so stupid. It's so stupid, but it's so cool at the same time. But yes. He had his own fan club. He had his own merch. Things were going great. Until 2000 comes along. And they realized that something wasn't right with our beautiful Ken Allen. And he was diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma. So, since he was in pain and struggling, the zoo had decided on December 1st, the year 2000, to euthanize our greatest legend of the orangutan community. And if you were curious, yes, the Orang Gang held a candlelit vigil for him. As they damn well should. So that was the episode of Orangutans I had. I hope you enjoyed the little anecdote of Ken Allen, the greatest orangutan to ever grace humanity. I know this one was a little bit more unhinged, but I don't know. I kind of like just going off the cuff sometimes, just ranting and raving. So, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, sub. You know, I'm sure you've been on YouTube long enough. You know all this stuff. If there's anything you might want to see in a future episode, maybe there's a favorite animal you have, a little bit of information about them you want to share, or, you know, just a general exhibit idea, I might incorporate it in the next episode. It'd probably be like, you know, 2 animals down the list. But feel free to share your ideas. Other than that, have a good day, go out, touch grass, hug your loved ones, and I will see you in the next episode when we finally reach letter C with the California sea lion. Alright, goodbye.